开始总理。好，女士们、先生们，各位媒体朋友，大家上午好。13届全国人大5次会议刚刚举行了闭幕会议，现在我们非常荣幸地邀请李克强总理同大家见面，并回答大家的提问。有请李总理。
Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the press, good morning. The 5th session of the 13th National People's Congress just closed. We are privileged to invite Premier Li Keqiang of the State Council to meet Chinese and foreign press and take your questions. I give the floor to Premier Li.
感谢记者朋友们在中国两会期间所做的努力的报道，付出的辛劳。因为疫情关系我们继续以视频连线的方式开记者会。我愿意回答记者朋友们提出的问题。
I wish to thank you, friends from the press, for your hard work in covering this year's China's NPC and CPPCC sessions. Due to COVID-19, we are again holding the press conference via video link. Now I'm happy to take your questions.
感谢李克强总理，现在开始提问。
请南区第3排右起第3位，美联社申资健。
Good morning. I'm from the Associated Press. I want to get your thoughts on the economic challenges China faces as it transitions from high-growth era to a more sustainable, equitable, and green growth. In the past year, the government has taken steps to reduce debt in the real estate market and regulate the digital economy. At the same time, the government has set a 5.5% growth target that many economists see as ambitious given the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Does this signal that China may make short-term adjustments this year that favor economic growth over a structural change and reducing carbon emissions? How does China balance the two? And specifically on Ukraine, how does China's important trading relationships with Europe and the US factor into the government's response to the crisis? Are you concerned that Chinese support for Russia could harm those relationships and then in turn the Chinese economy itself? Thank you.
美联社，我的问题关于中国经济所面临的多重挑战。中国经济现在正在逐渐地从高速增长向着可持续的、公平的以及绿色的增长进行转型。我们看到，去年中国政府采取了一系列措施来降低债务水平以及监管高技术企业。今年，中国政府制定了不少经济学家认为是颇具雄心的5.5%的增速目标，这是在面临新冠肺炎疫情继续蔓延以及乌克兰冲突的情况下制定的目标。我想问的是，中国政府是否意味着今年将更加重视增长，把增长摆在结构性改革以及减少碳排放之前呢？中国政府将如何平衡这些不同的发展目标呢？另外，关于乌克兰问题，中国与欧洲的重要经贸关系在中国应对此危机中处于什么位置呢？中国是否担心与俄之间的这种关系会因为目前对于危机的处理影响到其与欧洲之间的良好关系，甚至影响到中国自身经济的发展？谢谢。
你提到中国的经济增速 去年我们经济总量已经达到110万亿人民币，继续增长，可以说是在高基础上的增长。从世界方面来看，这么大的经济体要保持中高速的增长，本身就是很大的难题。刚才你提到，我们今年确定5.5的左右的经济增长目标是个雄心勃勃的目标。我还记得去年就是在这个记者会上，有记者问我说：“你们定6%以上，那6这个目标是不是低了？”我们不是没有感到，因为上一年基数低，去年完全有可能实现8乃至于更高的增长，但是我们还是确定增长6%以上。以上嘛是开了口子，乐见其成，但是我们宏观经济政策的标杆是按照6%来确定的，也就是说，财政、货币、就业等政策都要围绕这个标杆进行，这就使得我们降低了赤字率，宏观杠杆率稳中有降，这也为今年的应对新的挑战预留了政策空间。回想2020年，我们在那么严峻的形势下，没有搞大水漫灌、超发货币。去年乃至到今年2月份，在世界许多国家通胀高居的情况下，我们的居民消费价格，也就是 CPI， 不到1%，这不能说和我们实施的合理的宏观政策有关。
You asked about China's economic growth. I want to say last year China's economic aggregate reached 110 trillion RMB yuan. We expect China's economy to continue to grow on this high base. But experience in the global sphere has shown that it will be very hard for such a big economy to keep up a medium-high growth rate. You said that a 5.5% GDP growth target for this year is viewed as ambitious by many economists. I recall that at last year's press conference, a journalist asked me whether a 6% GDP growth target for that year was a bit too modest. My response was that we were actually aware of the possibility for even faster growth of the Chinese economy because of a low base of the previous year. But still we decided to set the growth target at above 6%. Meaning that we left possibilities open for even faster growth, say 8%. We would welcome that. But at the same time, we set all our macroeconomic policies, including fiscal, monetary, and employment policies, against this 6% GDP growth target. Under such circumstances, we cut our budget deficit ratio. There was a steady decrease in China's macro leverage ratio, and we reserved policy space for coping with new challenges this year. In spite of the severe situations in 2020, we refused to resort to flooding the economy with massive stimulus or excessive money supply. Hence, we saw that last year China's CPI rose less than 1% despite the high inflation worldwide. I think that very much has to do with our reasonable macroeconomic policies.
当然，刚才我讲的，我们制定宏观政策是从中国国情实际出发的，没有评价其他国家的意思。去年，在以习近平同志为核心的党中央坚强领导下，经过全国人民的共同努力，我们不仅完成了全年经济社会发展的主要目标任务，而且为今年打下了坚实的基础。今年确实遇到了新的下行挑战。且不说各种复杂环境在变化，不确定因素增多，就是我们本身要实现5.5的目标，它的增量，也就是说，中国100万亿级以上 GDP 5.5的增量，就相当于一个中等国家的水平。如果10年前还是50多万亿，那6、7万亿就可以了。今年得有8、9万亿的名义 GDP 的增长。这就好像登山，如果你要登1000米的山，想爬100米，想爬10%，那100米就可以。如果你要登3000米的山，想上5%，那就是150米。而且条件也变了，气压低，氧气少，看似放缓了，实际上分量更重。
We formulate China's own macroeconomic policies based on China's own national conditions, and I have no intention to make comments on the policies formulated by other countries here. Last year, under the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, and thanks to the joint efforts of people across the country, we successfully achieved the major economic and social development tasks and goals and laid a good foundation for our development this year. This year, we face new downside risks and challenges. There's a lot of complexities and rising uncertainty. On the basis of over 100 trillion RMB of GDP in China today, a 5.5% increase would generate the same amount of output equivalent to the size of a medium economy. Say, for 10 years ago, when China's GDP was just about 50 trillion RMB yuan, this growth rate would only add some 6 to 7 trillion yuan of output, but now the figure would reach 8 to 9 trillion yuan. One can draw an analogy with mountain climbing. In climbing a 1,000-meter high mountain, covering 10% of it is a distance of 100 meters. But for climbing a 3,000-meter high mountain, 5% of it will already cover a distance of 150 meters. Moreover, the higher one climbs, the lower the pressure, the less oxygen. So a slower growth on the surface actually now carries more weight.
实现5.5%的左右的增长，实质上是在高水平上的稳就是进，是不容易的，必须有相应的宏观政策的支撑。比如就财政政策，今年我们降低了赤字率到2.8%，少了2000多亿。但与此同时，我们加大了财政支出的力度。那你们会问，钱从哪里来？ 我在政府工作报告当中已经说了，我们从这2年可用未用结存的中央特定金融机构的收入和专营机构的利润，再加上财政结余的资金，支出规模不小于新增2万亿，而且增加的规模主要用来减税降费，甚至是退税。这相当于给登高山的时候输氧。当然，我们还有配套的金融、就业等多项举措。
We aim to achieve this about 5.5% GDP growth target for China's economy this year. This kind of steady progress is very important in itself, and it needs to be enabled by the support of a series of macroeconomic policies. Take fiscal policy, for example. We lowered our budget deficit ratio to 2.8% this year, a decrease of 200 billion yuan over last year. But we will beef up government spending this year. One may naturally ask how to pay for that. I have set it out in the government work report. We will draw on the savings that we did not tap into over the past 2 years, meaning we will use the surplus profits from state-owned financial institutions and state monopolies, and there will also be some surplus from the fiscal funds. In total, government spending this year will rise by no less than 2 trillion RMB yuan. Most of it will be used for tax and fee reductions and tax refunds, just like providing oxygen supply for mountain climber. At the same time, we are prepared to roll out a series of financial and pro-job policies too.
如果说我们今年采取的应对举措是短期的，那它也是立足当前、着眼长远的，绝不预支未来是可持续的。因为正像你记者朋友提到的，中国还有应对气候变化、收入差距、债务，包括人口等诸多的问题，这些都是需要我们在中长期过程当中，包括今年去有力的应对的。所以我们有关方面的措施都在安排部署。中国现代化还是一个长期的过程，我们需要在这个过程当中用发展的办法来解决发展的问题。
Our policies set for this year are based on the current realities and have also taken into account long-term development needs. They are sustainable. China is still faced with a series of challenges from, say, climate change, income gap, debt, and demographics. We are prepared to forcefully respond to all these challenges for now and beyond. China's modernization is a long process, and we will address issues arising in the course of development through development.
你刚才提到乌克兰的局势，当前乌克兰的局势是世人瞩目，中方也深感担忧和痛惜，真诚的希望乌克兰局势能够得到缓解，早日回归和平。中国始终是奉行独立自主的和平外交政策，发展双边关系从不针对第三方。我们将本着相互尊重、互利共赢的精神，同各方发展合作关系，为世界提供 更多的稳定性。谢谢。
On Ukraine, indeed, the current situation there is grave, and China is deeply concerned and aggrieved. We sincerely hope that the situation will ease and peace will return at an early date. China has all along followed an independent foreign policy of peace and never targets third parties in developing bilateral ties. We want to develop cooperation with all countries on the basis of mutual respect and mutual benefit to bring greater stability to today's world. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请北区第3排路透社韦聪。
Good morning. I'm from Reuters. Since Russia's attack on Ukraine, there have been 2 million refugees, hundreds of civilian deaths, and growing worries about the prospect of nuclear escalation. Yet, China has refused to condemn Russia's conduct, or call it an invasion. Will China refrain from condemning Russia's conduct in Ukraine, no matter what it does? Is China prepared to provide further economic and financial support for Russia as it faces sanctions? And is China concerned about sanctions blowback from other countries if it does so? Thank you.
路透社。俄罗斯对乌克兰发动袭击以来，已经造成200万难民、数百名平民死亡。人们对核态势升级前景也感到担忧。但中方一直没有对俄的行为进行谴责，或者将其称之为入侵。是否不论怎样，中方都不会对俄进行谴责？在俄罗斯面临制裁的情况下，中方是否会进一步对俄罗斯提供经济、金融支持？是否担心这样做会受到来自其他国家制裁的负面影响？
我刚才说了，中国从来都是奉行独立自主的和平外交政策。关于乌克兰局势，中方主张各国主权、领土完整都应该得到尊重，联合国宪章和原则都应该得到遵守，各国合理安全关切也应该得到重视。中方据此做出我们自己的判断，并愿意和国际社会一道，为重返和平发挥积极的作用。
As I just said, China follows an independent foreign policy of peace. Regarding the situation in Ukraine, China maintains that the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries should be respected. The purposes and principles of the UN Charter should be observed, and the legitimate security concerns of all countries should be taken seriously. On that basis, China makes its own assessment and will work with the international community to play a positive role for early return of peace.
当前的乌克兰局势确实令人担忧，应当尽最大努力来支持俄乌双方克服困难，进行停火谈判，谈出和平的结果。一切有利于和平解决危机的努力，我们都支持和鼓励。当务之急，还要避免紧张局势升级，甚至失控。国际社会和各方都是有共识的。
The current situation in Ukraine is indeed disconcerting. We believe utmost efforts should be made, and it is important to support Russia and Ukraine in carrying forward negotiations of ceasefire by overcoming difficulties to achieve peace. We support and encourage all efforts that are conducive to a peaceful settlement of the crisis. The pressing task now is to prevent tension from escalating or even getting out of control. There is consensus about this among the parties concerned and the international community.
中方呼吁保持最大限度的克制，防止出现大规模人道主义危机。中方已经提出应对乌克兰局势的，特别是人道局势的倡议，已经启动，并将继续向乌方提供人道主义援助。
China calls for exercising utmost restraint and preventing massive humanitarian crisis. China has put forward an initiative on the humanitarian situation there and has provided Ukraine with humanitarian assistance, and China will continue to do so.
当前世界经济受疫情冲击的影响已经很艰难了，有关制裁会对世界经济复苏造成冲击，对各方都不利。中方愿为维护世界的和平和稳定，促进发展繁荣，做出自己的也是建设性的努力。谢谢。
Reading from the COVID-induced shocks, the world economy today is already struggling. Relevant sanctions will hurt the world economic recovery. It is in no one's interest. China is ready to make its own constructive efforts in maintaining world peace and stability and promoting development and prosperity. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请南区第一排右起第二位 CNBC 郑一伦。
Thank you. I'm from CNBC. My question is about the tax and fee cuts. The National Institute for Finance and Development says that tax fee cuts help small businesses more, and then second is the tax cuts. But are there exact figures for how the tax and fee cuts exactly help the economy? And what are the considerations for local governments, especially as they're faced with the property markets slowdown and their effect to revenues? And finally, for the consumer aspect, are there considerations for using consumption vouchers or other measures? Thank you.
美国消费者与新闻频道，国家金融与发展实验室的有关研究显示呢，降费对于小企业的帮助是最大的，减税次之。您能否与我们分享关于减税降费影响的具体数据？那么另外呢，由于房地产市场发展速度的放缓，地方政府财政呢有所减少，对这个方面有什么考虑？还有就是涉及消费方面，政府会考虑采取发放消费券等其他类似的应对措施吗？谢谢。
决策是要有理论和实践支撑的。通过我们这几年的实践看，减税降费效果最直接。我记得去年到东部地区和10几位企业家交谈，他们谈到了运行当中的困难，希望国家再出台一些宏观支持的政策。我当时就说，中央政府的政策储备是有的，但需要集中使用。有3项选择，但只能做选择题，就是3选1。一是大规模投资，也许你们可以得到订单；二是发放消费券，可能会直接刺激消费；三是给企业减税降费，稳就业，促投资消费。他们沉默一会儿，几乎异口同声地回答：我们选择第3项，因为这是最直接、最公平、最有效率的。从今年我收到的有关报告看， 普遍把减税降费作为对政府宏观政策的第一个期待。看来啊，施肥还真是要浇到根上，根壮才能枝繁叶茂。
We can only make informed decisions based on actual practices. The practices of ours in recent years have shown that tax and fee reductions have worked the best. I recall that last year I had a conversation with a dozen business representatives in an eastern province. They talked about their corporate difficulties and their hope for more policy support from the government. I said that the central government had a host of tools in its policy kit, but we need to use them to the best effective. So I gave them 3 options to choose but one that they prefer the most. They are massive investment, which will help them get orders. The second is handing out consumption vouchers to boost consumer spending. And the third is tax and fee reductions to help drive up employment, consumption, and investment. They were only quiet for a moment and almost unanimously chose the third policy option because they believe it would work most directly in a most fair and efficient way. Many reports I have received have shown that tax and fee cuts are the #1 aspiration among business entities out of the government's macro policies. It seems that indeed we need to ensure that fertilizer goes right way to the root of plants. When the root is strong, the plants can grow well.
我在材料上也看到了，有人担心减费降税实施这么几年了，边际效应是不是递减了？也就是说，作用不像以前那么大了。这次我们实施的大规模减税降费是退税和减税并举，规模2.5万亿。在2021年冲击最严重的时候，我们也就是这么大的规模都挺过来了，而且我们这次调整结构了，把退税顶在前面。所谓退税就是按照税制的设计，许多市场主体它是先交，类似于先交后征。那么我们采取退税的办法，就是一次性的把留抵的税退给企业，规模约1.5万亿以上。如果效果好，我们还会加大力度。
There is this kind of worry that tax and fee reductions have been in place for several years. They wonder whether the marginal effect will be fading. In other words, whether this policy will work as well as before. This year, we will combine tax and fee reductions with massive tax refunds with a total amount of 2.5 trillion RMB yuan. We recall that with these policies, we successfully pulled through those very difficult times back in 2020. Tax refund will be the highlight of policy this year. Under the current tax code, businesses, there will be tax collection first, and then there will be tax refund. And this year, we will make a 1.5 trillion RMB yuan amount of VAT credit refunds. If this works well, we are prepared to even step it up.
我们优先考虑小微企业，因为小微企业量大面广，支撑的就业人口多，而且现在是他们 资金紧张、最困难的时候，所以我们要在今年6月底以前，把留底的小微企业的税一次性推缴到位，把制造业、研发服务业等一些重点行业在年内全面解决，对小微企业的增量留抵退税逐月的解决。我在政协参加讨论的时候，一位政协委员是企业家，他就告诉我，说不管是减税降费还是其他的投资等措施，退税来得最快，来得最好。跑个项目可能有很多周折，退税等于是给企业直接发现金流，是及时雨。看来呀，好话说破千言万语，不如干成实事一桩。一定要把这项关键性的措施落到位。
Priority will be given to micro and small firms in the refunding of VAT credits, because these firms cover a wide range of sectors and are of a large amount. They support a massive amount of job opportunities. Currently, many of them are financially strapped and are in great difficulty. The goal is to refund all the VAT credits to micro and small firms in a lump sum by the end of June. And for the newly increased VAT credits, they will be refunded to these firms over time on a monthly basis. And within this year, the existing VAT credits to manufacturing and R&D intensive firms will also be refunded. I recall that in my discussion with the CPPCC members, a member who is also a business representative told me that as effective as tax and fee cuts and other investment-related and other policies are, he believes that the VAT credit refunds will work the fastest and the best. For instance, if you go for an investment project, it may also involve a lot of procedures. But this VAT refunds will be like direct funding support for the liquidity of businesses. So we must get one real important solid thing done. I think that's more important than making 1,000 promises. We must see to it that this highlight of policy this year will be fully delivered.
退税减税啊，是在做减法，但实质上也是加法，因为你今天退，明天就是增。你今天的减，明天就可能是加。就去年当年，我们新增纳税市场主体的交的钱，就超过了我们减税的钱。这是有账可查的。从2013年，我们实施增值税改革，减税为导向，累计大概减了8.7万亿。当时开始的时候，我们的财政收入大概11万亿，去年已经突破了20万亿。增加了近1倍，因为企业在这个过程当中受益了。所谓受益，是它的效益也增加了。所谓水深鱼归啊，水多鱼多，这是涵养了税源，培养了市场主体的发展壮大。
Tax refunds at the moment will lead to increase in tax revenue in the future. For example, last year, our newly registered market entities already paid more taxes than the amount of tax reductions. There are clear records for these developments. Since 2013, with the launch of VAT reform, we have cut taxes by the amount of 8.7 trillion RMB yuan. Back then, our fiscal revenue was about 11 trillion yuan, but last year, China's fiscal revenue already exceeded 20 trillion yuan, almost doubled the amount back in 2013. In this process, businesses have truly benefited and improved their performance. It's like building a deeper pool to farm more fish. Our tax and fee cut and refund measures have helped to nurture business growth and created more sources of tax revenue.
刚才你说到地方财政收入遇到新的困难，我们注意到了，所以今年中央对地方的转移支付是多年来少有的，增加18%， 9.8万亿。退税主要是中央财政掏腰包，当然地方政府也得凑份子。我们退税的钱是直达企业，考虑到基层的困难，我们对基层的转移支付些补助资金是直达市县以下基层，这就要求我们的地方政府要当铁公鸡啊，不该花的钱你1分钱都不能花，该给市场主体的钱1分都不能少。你多1分，那是增添光彩。谢谢。
You mentioned the financial difficulty of local governments. The central government is aware of that. This year, the central government's transfer payments to local governments will rise 18% and reach 9.8 trillion yuan, a rare amount in recent years. Most tax refunds will be funded by the central government, and a certain amount will also be shared by local governments. I want to emphasize that tax refunds will go straight to businesses, and the central government will also see to it that fiscal funding support will also go directly to these primary level governments, especially prefecture and county level governments. I also want to emphasize that we in governments at all levels must count every cent and make every cent count to ensure that all funding support will go to businesses.
请继续提问。
请北区第2排第2位女士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。总理您好，我是来自香港凤凰卫视、凤凰网、凤凰秀的记者胡玲。我们知道，去年以来，香港特区呢是先后进行了选举委员会的选举以及第7届立法会的选举。那么今年呢还要举行第6任行政长官的选举。但大家也非常关注啊，一方面呢是新的选举制度，另外一方面现在香港的疫情还没有出现好转的迹象。大家非常关注这场选举。那么我也想知道，总理您对此如何评价？谢谢。
With Phoenix TV, over the past year, elections of the Election Committee and the 7th Legislative Council were held in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. This year, election of the 6th-term Chief Executive will be held there. Close attention is being paid to this election, how it will be conducted under the new electoral system, and at a time when the COVID situation in Hong Kong has yet to turn the corner. What is your comment, Mr. Premier?
当前啊，香港新冠疫情形势严峻， 特区政府依法决定推迟第6任行政长官选举，集中精力来抗疫，我们充分理解和支持。中央政府每天都在关注着香港疫情的发展，十分惦念香港市民的生命健康和安全。特区政府要负起抗疫的主体责任，中央政府会全力支持抗疫。
The current COVID situation in Hong Kong is indeed serious. The Hong Kong SAR government has decided, in accordance with the law, to postpone election of chief executive and concentrate on dealing with the COVID situation. We have full understanding and support for that. The central government follows the COVID situation developments in Hong Kong every day and has deep concern for the life, health and safety of residents in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong SAR government needs to fulfill its primary responsibility in tackling the situation, and the central government will give full support.
我们将全面、准确、坚定不移地贯彻一国两制、港人治港、高度自治的方针。特区政府的换届将严格按照基本法相关规定进行。我们也希望特区政府团结带领香港各界人士，继续发展经济、改善民生，巩固好、提升好香港国际金融、贸易和航运3大中心的地位，保持香港长期繁荣稳定。谢谢。
We are steadfast in our commitment to fully and faithfully implementing the principle of one country, two systems, under which the people of Hong Kong administer Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. Change of government in Hong Kong will happen in strict accordance with relevant provisions in the Basic Law. We hope that the SAR government will unite and lead of people across sectors in Hong Kong to continue to develop the economy, improve people's lives, consolidate and elevate Hong Kong's status as an international financial, trading and shipping center, and maintain long-term prosperity and stability in Hong Kong. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请南区第4排第1位女士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。总理您好，我是中央广播电视总台的记者，我想请问总理一个就业的问题。那当前我们也看到了一些企业预期不稳，部分行业岗位缩减，还有的企业出现了裁员。另外一方面，新就业人口又在不断的增加，所以想请问一下总理，今年我们将会采取什么样的措施来实现稳就业的目标？谢谢。
CCTV. We are seeing weak business expectations, job cuts in many industries, and sizable layoffs by some companies. Meanwhile, more job seekers are joining the labor force. I would like to ask Mr. Premier, what measures will the government take this year to achieve the goal of keeping employment stable?
就业不仅是民生问题，也是发展问题。有就业才有收入，生活有奔头，也为社会创造财富。我记得去年到企业调研的时候，有不少企业负责人跟我说到了8月份，许多职工向他预支工资，为什么？9月份孩子要交学费。我春节前到西北农村调研，农民就告诉我，他一个孩子上大学花费1年得1万多块钱，还有一个上高中得8000多块钱，靠种几亩地是不行的，必须有打工的收入。所以说 打工就业，它不仅关系当前的民生，我也真是为我们的人民群众感动，他们还在有很多人努力着，通过就业为下一代来争取更好的未来。
Employment bears on people's lives and the country's development. A job helps to generate income, makes life promising, and helps to create wealth. I recall that in my discussions with business leaders, many of them told me that about August every year, many of their employees would ask for an advance on their wages because they will need to pay for their children's tuition fees in September. Before this year's Spring Festival, I paid a visit to rural areas in China's northwest. A local farmer told me that he had one child going to college, whose tuition fee is some 10,000 yuan each year. And for another child in senior high school, the tuition fee is 8,000 yuan every year. He says that he had to go to work in the city, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to make enough money to cover all these expenses by just growing grain on his small land plot. So a job bears directly on the life of our people, and I have been always deeply touched by the hard work that our people have been putting in to earn enough to support their younger generations.
今年我们加大宏观政策的支持力度，财政、货币政策要围绕实现就业目标来展开，所以我们叫做就业优先，也是宏观政策，其他政策配套为实现就业目标而努力。因为我们现在每年新增城镇劳动力必须有1100万人以上，最好是有1300万人以上的就业。我总觉得只要实现了比较充分的就业，就能够实现有些人说的中国的所谓潜在的增长率。有一个实例，2020年严重冲击的时候，我们没有定经济增长指标，但是我们定了一个明确的指标，就是新增城镇就业人口要900万以上，结果实现了1100万人以上的新增城镇就业，我们的经济不仅实现了正增长，而且2.2，在主要经济体当中是唯一实现正增长。
We need to implement our fiscal and monetary policies to all help us to achieve our goal of employment. That is why we say that policy of employment or our employment first policy is also a macroeconomic policy. Each year, we need to generate at least 11 million or preferably 13 million new urban jobs. If we could achieve maximum employment, we would be able to achieve what some people say China's potential economic growth rate. There is one concrete example here. Back in 2020, when things were so difficult, we decided not to set a GDP growth target, but we set the target of new urban jobs at above 9 million. Our outcome was that we created over 11 million new urban jobs and kept China's growth in the positive territory, 2.2%. China's economy was the only one among major economies to achieve a positive growth.
今年学校在城镇安排的新增城镇就业，我们虽然按计划定，但实际新增是1600万人，历年来最高。大学毕业生1076万，也是历年最高。还有3亿左右的农民工要有打工的机会，还要保障退役军人就业。还有一些企业，它生生死死有些要再就业，这就需要我们看到新增城镇劳动力是在增长的，要有新的就业的平台。对于新增就业人员，我们还要给他与培训措施等多方面的支持举措，也就是要用市场化的方法来解决就业问题。比如这些年我们在推动大众创业、万众创新，促进发展新技术、新业态、新规、新模式，培育新动能。我们就相信普通人有上乘之，把他们的特长、聪明才智发挥出来，那就业的大舞台会绚丽多彩。
This year, we will see a record high increase of new job seekers into the labor force, totaling some 16 million. There will be 10.76 million students graduating from college, another record high. We also need to provide jobs for some 300 million rural migrant workers. Employment also needs to be provided for ex-servicemen and women, and some people are waiting to get re-employed. There is a steady increase in the labor force of China, and new platforms of employment need to be created. The government will provide these new job seekers with training programs and opportunities, but more importantly, we need to rely on market-oriented avenues and means to resolve issues related to employment. In recent years, we have been promoting the initiative of mass entrepreneurship and innovation, and we have been encouraging the growth of new technologies, new industries, and new business models to create new drivers of growth. We believe that there is great intelligence and potential in each and every common person. If we can give them opportunities to bring the potential out, we will be able to open new vistas.
这里还不能不提到灵活就业，因为有2亿多人，形式多样，覆盖面广。作为一个发展中国家，这种就业形式还会比较长期的存在。他们风里来雨里去，确实很辛苦，很多地方在给他们提供暖心服务。作为政府，对侵害他们劳动权益的，乃至于必要的劳动保障，我们要逐步的采取完善的政策。也就是说，要给这些骑手们系上安全带，让灵活就业等新就业形态既解燃眉之急，还激发市场和社会的活力与创造力。谢谢。
I should also mention flexible employment here. There are about 200 million people engaged in flexible employment, taking multiple forms and covering a wide range of sectors. This will continue to exist in a big developing country like China. Many of these people engaged in these jobs are express delivery express delivery service providers. They have to work braving winds and rains. And many localities have provided these people with heartwarming services. We need to protect their lawful rights and interests, and the government will also continue to improve policies related to providing social protection for these people. It's like providing a safety belt for the delivery persons. In this way, these new forms of employment will not only meet people's pressing need, but also help bring greater vitality to the market and the public. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请北区第2排左起第3位爱妃社 Lorena。
Good morning. I'm with Spain's news agency, EFE. And so we're already 2 years into the pandemic, and China has remained close to the world during all this time. So my question is, for how long is zero COVID policy sustainable for China? And is there a roadmap to start reopening the country in the foreseeable future? Thank you.
西班牙爱妃社，疫情发生已经2年的时间了。在过去2年当中，中国基本是关闭。那么，中方现在是否考虑将自己目前的动态清零的疫情防控政策变得更加可持续呢？是否有一个向世界开放的路线图？谢谢。
新冠病毒是人类共同的敌人，传播2年了，但病毒一直在变化，一些规律还需要深入研究，相应的像疫苗保护、有效药物研发等也需要加强。国际社会的当前还是要团结合作、手腕相助，相互之间多一些理解和包容，努力为世界回归正常来共同创造条件。
The novel coronavirus is a common enemy of humankind. It has been with us for 2 years, but the virus is still changing. Much remains to be learned about the virus. At the same time, the protection of vaccines and R&D of effective drugs should also be further enhanced. We believe the international community should embrace unity and cooperation and show greater mutual understanding and accommodation, and make joint efforts to create conditions for early return to normal of our world.
中国一直统筹疫情防控和经济社会发展，积极推动国际交往合作。我们会根据疫情的形势变化和病毒的特点，使防控更加科学精准，保障人民生命健康，保障正常生产生活秩序，保障产业链、供应链的安全。
China has adopted a coordinated approach to COVID response and economic and social development, and we have been promoting actively international exchanges and cooperation. We will continue to work to make our response more scientific and targeted based on the COVID situation, new developments and features of the virus to protect people's life, health and safety, to keep up the normal running of work and life, and to ensure security of industrial and supply chains.
疫情发生以来我多次与国际组织负责人、跨国公司、企业家对话，他们都希望要保证必要的商务往来。我们已经开通了快捷通道和绿色通道，对一些关键环节的企业和项目来保障他们正常的生产经营。我们会不断的积累经验，及时应对可能发生的变化，逐步使物流、人流有序地畅通起来。谢谢。
In my my conversations with heads of international institutions and business community, many of them expressed the hope for the keeping of business exchanges as needed. China has opened the fast-track lanes and green corridors to see the normal running of companies and important projects in key areas. We will continue to gain experience and be adaptive to new developments so as to keep up the flow of goods and personnel. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请南区第一排南起第3位男士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。总理您好，我是新华社记者。这些年，我国的营商环境虽然有所改善，政府市场主体大幅增长，企业办事也方便了许多，但各种干扰仍然不少。请问，在当前情况下，政府在优化营商环境、激发市场活力和创造力方面还会做哪些努力？谢谢。
Xinhua News Agency. Recent years have seen steady improvement in China's business climate, as evidenced by a surge in market entities and easier access to government services for enterprises. However, various disturbances to business activity still exist. What more will the government do to improve the business climate and better stimulate market vitality and public creativity?
近10年啊，中国国务院每年都要召开一次全国性的推进放管服改革、优化营商环境的会议。我也注意到，今年开年第1年，许多地方都突出改善营商环境的主题来开会。可以说放管服改革是为市场主体改良生长的土壤，减税降费则是为他们浇肥浇水。大众创业万众创新是要推动更多的市场主体能够生根发芽。只要我们把人民的创造力发挥出来，把市场主体的活力激发出来，大家可以想象这个经济的生动局面但是这必须进行刀刃向内的改革，不能让政府部门围绕着自己的权力在转，要让市场主体层出不穷，生机勃勃。
Over the past 10 years, each year the State Council will hold a nationwide working conference on the reform of government functions and improvement of China's business climate. I have also noted that improving business climate has also been high on the agenda of the first meetings of many local governments in the new year. By reforming government functions, we are like improving the soils for the growth of market entities. Our policy of tax and fee reductions is like applying furniture, fertilizer, and water, and the initiative of mass entrepreneurship and innovation also helps market entities to take root and further grow. By leveraging the creativity of the general public and the vitality of market entities, we will be able to bring a lot of vitality to China's economic growth. This requires the government pursues self-targeted reform to see that government power is not about departmental or other interests, but to help market entities to flourish.
触动利益是比触动灵魂要难。 但是正贵有恒。这些年，我们持续推进市场化改革，推进放管服改革，有1000多项行政许可被下放或取消，非行政许可退出历史舞台。过去办企业要几十天的时间，多次上百天。现在在全国范围内，平均办企业4天，最少的地方1天，而且大约90%的政府服务是网上办、掌上办、异地办、不见面办。实际上，这是在打破利益的藩篱，是惠企利民，也突破了传统的思维。惠企利民的措施，我们会继续推进下去。
Shaking up vested interests could be more difficult than touching the depths of souls. In recent years, we have ensured the consistency in our policies. We have been pressing ahead with market-oriented reforms and the reform of the government's own functions. For example, we have either cancelled or delegated to lower-level authorities some 1,000 administrative approval items. The non-administrative approval requirement was made a thing of the past. In the past, it took several dozen days or even up to 100 days to open a business. But now it takes only 4 days or just 1 day in some places. Currently, some 90% of government services can be accessed interprovincially, online or through cell phone apps. We are doing all these to upset or break down the thickets of vested interests and changing the way of thinking of the government in exercising governance so as to bring greater benefits to companies and the people, and we will continue to do so in the future.
这些年，通过营商环境不断改善，我国市场主体已经达到1.5亿户，比10年前净增了1亿户，都是民营企业，都是社会的民间的投资，而且其中个体工商户也达到1亿户，可不要小看个体工商户，它是一头连着众多人的生计，一头连着大众的消费。我在政协讨论的时候，那些企业家就说，如果没有小微企业和个体工商户打通微细血管，那大中企业甚至国有央企都动不起来。
By improving the business climate, in recent years, we have seen that the number of market entities in China has reached 150 million, an increase of 100 million over 10 years ago. Most of these market entities are privately held firms. There is some 100 million self-employed households who must not be underestimated because they support the livelihoods of many families, and they also help to meet consumer demand. In my discussions with business leaders, they told me that it is those very micro and small firms and self-employed households who are playing a significant role in supporting the circulation of the economy. Otherwise, without them, even big companies, even state-owned enterprises will be hamstrung.
大家到经济发展好的地方可以看一看，那里都是改革力度大，营商环境好，市场主体多，所以经济蓬勃勃勃。当然，我多次强调，放管是并行的， 放不是放责，管是政府必须履行的职责。放也不是放任，对那些像假冒伪劣、坑蒙拐骗的行为，那要坚决打击。尤其是对一些涉及人民生命健康和众多群众利益的，像食品药品安全生产乃至于金融等领域，要加强监管，违规违法的必须整除。现在新业态、新模式也在不断变化的发展，但是监管的规律是存在的，我们要不断的完善监管的方式，使我国的市场主体真正在公平公正的环境中发展。谢谢。
When there are good reform measures, a sound business climate, and a larger number of market entities, there will be greater prospects for economic development. That has been true in many places across this country. At the same time, I want to emphasize that we have been attaching equal importance to streamlining administration and enhancing compliance oversight. Streamlining administration does not mean a diminishing in the responsibilities of the people, and delegation of authority shouldn't give rise to regulatory gaps. The government must fully perform its responsibility in exercising supervision and regulation. For malpractices such as counterfeiting or cheating of marketplace, they should be cracked down upon. And regulation in areas concerning people's life and health and public interests like food, drugs, workplace safety, and the financial sector, it should be further stepped up in accordance with the law. There are also burgeoning new forms of industry and new business models. They are continuously developing, and we also need to keep improving our regulatory approaches in these areas, so as to ensure that there will always be a level playing field for all market entities to grow. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请北区第5排左起第2位彭博社。
Thank you. I'm with Bloomberg News. 50 years ago, then U.S. President Richard Nixon visited China and began what became known as a period of American engagement with China. Last year, the Biden administration said that period had come to an end, and China and the U.S. were headed instead into a period of intense competition. I wonder, Mr. Premier, if you would agree with that assessment? Will things such as bans on American semiconductors being sold in China or bans against Chinese companies listing shares in the U.S. become more and more common? Thank you.
彭博新闻社50年前，美国总统尼克松对中国的访问，开启了美国对华接触的时代。去年，拜登政府宣布这一时代已经结束，美中两国现在正进入激烈竞争的时期。您是否同意这一评价？那么，像禁止在华销售美国的半导体，以及禁止中国企业在美上市，这样的情形会不会变得越来越常见呢
？50年前中美两国打破坚冰，开启了关系正常化的航程，半个世纪过去了。两国关系虽然时有磕磕碰碰，但是一直是向前发展。我们还是希望双方按照两国元首在去年年底视频会晤时达成的共识，要相互尊重、和平共处、合作共赢，以理性和建设性的方式，妥善地管控分歧，尊重彼此的核心利益和重大关切，还是要多对话、多沟通。既然双方互相打开了大门，就不应再关上，更不能脱钩。
50 years ago, China and the United States broke ice and started a journey of normalizing relations between the two countries. Half a century has passed. China-US relationship has been moving forward despite ups and downs. We hope that the two countries will act in accordance with the common understandings reached between presidents of the two countries in their virtual meeting at the end of last year. We hope the two countries will respect each other, live together in peace, and pursue win-win cooperation. We hope that the two countries will properly manage differences in a rational and constructive manner and respect each other's core interests and major concerns. There should be more dialogue and communication. Now that the door has been opened, it shouldn't be shut again, nor should there be decoupling.
中美是联合国安理会的常任理事国，也是世界上最大的发展中国家和最大的发达国家。处理好彼此的关系，事关两国人民的福祉。当前不少全球性的挑战都需要中美两国开展合作，共同应对。中美合作，应该说对两国、对世界都有益。
Both countries are permanent members of the UN Security Council, and China and the United States are the world's largest developing and developed countries, respectively. Getting this relationship right is in the well-being of people of both countries. Currently, there are many global challenges that require the joint efforts and cooperation of both China and the United States. We believe that cooperation between the two countries is in the interest of both countries and the world.
当然，中美两国社会制度、历史文化、发展阶段都存在着很大的差异。有分歧是难免的，但我们认为合作应当是主流，因为世界和平与发展依赖于合作。即使我们在经贸领域里边有市场性的竞争，那也应该是良性公平的竞争。
China and the US are vastly different in social system, history, culture, and stage of development. Disagreements are hardly avoidable, but we believe cooperation should be the mainstream because global peace and development hinges on cooperation. Even if there is market competition between the two countries in economy and trade, we believe it should be healthy and fair.
去年，两国贸易额超过了7500亿美元，比上年增长了30%。这说明什么？中美合作领域是广阔的，是有巨大潜力的。如果美国放宽对中国的出口限制，双边贸易额还会更大，两国和两国人民都会从中受益。中方愿同美方一道，则宽处行，谋长久利。谢谢。
Last year, China-US trade exceeded $750 billion, up 30% over the previous year. This shows China-US cooperation has extensive areas and much untapped potential. If the United States chooses to ease its export restrictions on China, two-way trade volume will grow even bigger, delivering more benefits to both countries and their peoples. China is ready to work with the United States to expand common ground and pursue interests for the long run. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请南区第二排第3位男士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。中国新闻社、中国新闻网记者提问：这2年受疫情冲击，我们发现以前有一些经常去的小吃店、小餐馆关门之后就没再开业了，包括餐饮在内旅游、零售、客运等行业也都受到很大影响。政府工作报告提出要稳市场主体、保就业。想请问总理，在帮助特殊困难行业方面，今年我们将拿出哪些举措？谢谢。
China News Service, Mr. Premier, we have noted that due to the COVID-19 impacts, many of the street-side little snack shops or little stores have been shut. Well, in addition to catering, industries like hospitality, retail, and passenger transport have also been hard hit. In the government work report, the government says it will provide support to market entities and keep employment stable this year. So I would like to ask, what measures will the government take this year to help these industries in distress?
疫情发生后啊，受冲击最大的是服务业，特别是结构性的服务业，而其中量大面广的是中小微企业。他们底子本来就薄，而且可以说是精打细算、日新月节的经营，很多困难积累起来，让他们难以支撑。帮助他们，实际上也是在支撑就业，因为仅1亿个体工商户就带动了3亿左右的就业。如果等他们苗枯根烂了，那再帮也来不及了。所以呀，我们一定要看到所谓秤砣虽小压千斤，得给他们及时的扶持。
COVID-19 has hit the services sector, in particular contact-based service industries, particularly hard. Many firms in these industries are micro, small and medium-sized enterprises who are already quite weak financially, and there are a host of difficulties making things more difficult for these market entities. While the 100 million self-employed households have supported some 300 million jobs, we must provide timely help to all these market entities because they play a very important leveraging role. Timely help is critical, just as it will be too late to water a plant if the root is dried out and rotten.
对这些特殊困难行业，我们已经出台了40多项扶持政策。仅退税这一项，粗算一下，像餐饮、旅游、客运、文化这几个行业，就能够享受1800亿。他们不仅需要财政的支持，对那些市场前景好的金融业也要给予无缝的续贷，而且对他们需要阶段性减或免房租、电费的，有能力的地方也应该给予支持。这实际上也是业主在拉住客户。
For these industries in special difficulty, we have worked out over 40 supportive measures. The tax refund alone for catering, tourism, passenger transport, and the cultural sector will amount to 180 billion RMB yuan. In addition to fiscal support, we also encourage banks to provide loan extension for promising businesses. And we also encourage the employers, where possible, to provide the exemption of or temporary exemption of rental and electricity bills for these market entities. This is also a way of keeping your clients.
当前啊， 消费需求的确是疲弱，主要是线下的消费需求疲弱。大家可以想象，市井长巷，店铺林立，热气腾腾，那就是熙熙攘攘的人间烟火。如果关门了，那可不是大吉，老百姓生活都会受到影响。所以我们扶持这些特殊行业，不仅是让他们挺过去，而且也是给人民的生活有温度，让我们的经济能够显示更多的生气。谢谢。
Currently, consumer demand is indeed quite subdued. In particular, consumption in bricks and mortar shops is muted. There's only vibrancy in the economy when hustle and bustle can return to the marketplaces and shops. So business closure is something that no one wants to see. It actually can affect our daily lives. Our policy support for these industries in special difficulty is not just about providing these industries with timely help. It will also help bring greater warmth to our people's lives and add greater vibrancy to China's economy. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请北区第3排第1位女士提问，谢谢。
主持人，谢谢。总理你好，我是来自台湾的网络媒体东森新媒体 ET Today 驻北京的记者任以芳。今天想请教您，在疫情持续蔓延、两岸关系不确定、不稳定性增加的情况下，请问大陆方面将如何应对台海局势，维持并且增进两岸民众的福祉？谢谢。
ET Today of Taiwan.Under the situation of further spread of the coronavirus and rising uncertainty and instability in the cross-strait relations, how will the mainland respond to the situation across the Taiwan Strait and uphold and promote the well-being of people on both sides of the strait?
我们的对台大政方针是明确的，我在政府工作报告中都表述了，就是坚持一个中国原则和9·2共识，坚决反对台独分裂行径，推动两岸关系和平发展和祖国统一。
Our major principles and policies on work related to Taiwan are clear-cut. I have set them out in the government work report. That is, we are committed to the One China principle and the 1992 consensus. We firmly oppose separatist activities seeking Taiwan independence, and we will advance peaceful growth of cross-strait relations and the reunification of China.
两岸同胞说到底是一家人，手足亲情，任何时候都是割不断的。我们愿意继续同广大同胞、广大台湾同胞分享发展机遇，对来大陆发展的台湾同胞提供同等待遇，为他们办实事、解难事。我想，只要两岸同胞合舟共济、团结向前，就一定能够推动两岸关系和平发展，共享中华民族复兴的福祉。谢谢。
Ultimately, compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Straits are members of one big same family, and this fraternal bond at no time can be severed. We will continue to share with our Taiwan compatriots development opportunities. We will provide Taiwan compatriots coming to work and live on the mainland with equal treatment. We will also take concrete measures to benefit them and help them resolve difficulties. I believe that when the people on both sides of the strait come together and forge ahead in unity, we will be able to promote the peaceful growth of cross-strait relations and sharing the well-being of the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请南区第2排靠中间走廊，联合早报单序。 谢谢主持人。李总理您好，新加坡联合早报提问。今年是本届中国政府的收官之年，那回顾过去4年多的执政历程，您认为本届政府取得的主要成绩有哪些？遇到的最大挑战又是什么？那在本届政府的最后1年里，中国经济面临着前所未有的压力，您将重点实施哪些政策，以更好地稳定社会的信心，回应民众的关切？谢谢。
联合早报 of Singapore.The year 2022 is the last year in the current term of the Chinese government. Looking back at the course of governance in the past 4 years, what do you think are the major achievements of this government? What is the biggest challenge for it? With China's economy under unprecedented pressure, what will be the government's policy priorities in the last year of its term to keep the public confident and respond to people's concerns?
本届政府以来国际形势是复杂多变，国内矛盾和困难叠加。但是你要说到最大的挑战，那还是新冠疫情及其带来的严重的经济冲击。我们对此志不求易，事不避难，行不避险，尽了最大的努力。
Since the formation of this government, there has been much complexity and change in the international environment. There are interconnected, entwined difficulties and challenges at home, but the biggest challenge came from the COVID-19 pandemic, which dealt a heavy blow to China's economy. In responding to the challenge, we have not settled for the easy or shied away from what's difficult and these risks. We have put in our greatest efforts.
我记得我出任总理，在这里召开第1次记者会，也就是在这个大厅里边，就明确的表明，持续发展经济，不断改善民生，促进社会公正，这是我们的政府的基本任务。所谓行大道，民为本，利天下，那也就是要以民之所盼为施政所向。
I recall that at my first press conference as Premier, held in the same place, I once laid out the basic tasks and missions for the government as maintaining economic development, improving people's lives, and promoting social fairness, and said that I believed in following the Great Way, putting people first, and delivering benefits for all. Indeed, we should ensure that the people's wish always points the way for the government.
这些年，我们锲而不舍，一以贯之，实施施政的，或者说创新施政方式，用保持经济运行在合理区间的等方式来应对周期性的经济波动，尤其是把宏观政策的实施直面市场主体的需求，坚定推进改革，减除繁苛，维护公正，培育和壮大市场主体和新动能，激发市场和社会的活力，坚持就业优先，把握国情的实际，注重保障基本民生等等。政府的工作有人民群众认可的地方，也有具 他们的期盼有差距和不足的地方，这些我们是清楚的。
This is what we have been doing consistently and diligently throughout the years. We have followed innovative approaches to exercising governance. For example, we have adopted a range-based approach in dealing with cyclical fluctuations in economic activity. We have ensured that macro policies are directly responsive to the needs of market entities. We have pressed ahead with reforms to cut red tape and promote fairness and justice. We have supported the growth of market entities and new drivers of growth to boost market and public vitality and creativity. We have implemented an employment-first policy and grounded our efforts in China's national realities with a focus on improving the people's basic lives. We are also aware that while our people are happy with some aspects of the government's work, there are also areas in the government's work that are falling short of our people's expectations.
至于你说到今年是本届政府的最后一年，也是我担任总理的最后一年，我们所面临的形势依然复杂严峻，困难和挑战依然众多。我在政府工作报告和刚才回答的一些问题当中，已经做了说明和阐述。我和我的同事们会以锲而不舍的精神，恪尽职守，用实干来践行承诺。
You said this year is the last year in the current term of the Chinese government. This year is also the last year in my premiership. We are still faced with a complicated international environment that is very challenging, and there are also still many difficulties and challenges in work at home. As to how to respond to these challenges and difficulties, I have set out our policies in the government work report and also in my answers to some previous questions. Me and my colleagues will make persistent efforts, conscientiously perform our duties, and take solid steps to live up to our promises.
我相信，在以习近平同志为核心的党中央的坚强领导下，有社会各界的大力支持，特别是人民群众的共同奋斗，中国经济一定能够爬坡过坎，实现今年全年经济社会发展的主要目标任务，并为以后的发展奠定应有的坚实基础。谢谢。
I'm confident that under the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, with strong support of various sectors, and especially with the joint hard work of the Chinese people across the country, China's economy will be able to overcome difficulties. We will be able to achieve all the major goals and tasks for economic and social development set for the whole year and lay a due, solid foundation for the development of the country in the future. Thank you.
请继续提问。
请北区第一排第二位男士提问，谢谢。
总理您好，我是人民日报社记者。近年来，我国居民人均收入逐年提高，但还是有不少人仍然感觉到生活不易，特别是新冠疫情对基本民生带来了较大的影响。请问总理，那么今年政府在改善民生方面会有什么考虑和举措？谢谢。
People's Daily. Mr. Premier, China's per capita GDP, China's personal income has also been steadily rising in recent years. However, many people still find their lives quite hard. In particular, the meeting of basic living needs of the people has been quite severely affected by COVID-19. I would like to ask, how will the government do this year to further improve people's lives?
这些年啊，我国居民的收入和 GDP 的增长是基本同步的，但是中国啊依然是一个发展中国家，我们的城乡差距是明显的。公共服务要均等化，那是一个长期的过程。所以在今年年初，有关方面给我递了民生10判，我看多数都是基本民生啊，而且呢，多数来自农民群众，所以政府要始终把发展经济的目的放在保障和改善民生上，当然是尽力而为，量力而行。
Indeed, in recent years, our people's income has been growing in step with GDP. However, China remains a developing country. There is still a notable urban-rural gap, and it will take a long time for us to achieve equal access to public services across the country. I received a report early this year listing the top 10 hopes our people have for their life this year. Most of them concern basic living needs or involve Chinese farmers. Protecting and promoting people's lives is a fundamental purpose for the government's effort in growing the economy. The government must continue to do its utmost within its capacity to keep making improvements to people's lives.
不过现在财政总收入已经有20万亿，但并不宽裕。连续10年了，我们尽力把财政给义务教育的支出不低于4%，这是很不容易的，而且主要是面向义务教育，面向农村，因为我们农村的户籍人口现在还有7.6亿，还要进一步加大向农村和边远地区义务教育的投入力度。另一方面，我们已经建立了普及面向14亿人的，可以说世界上最大的基本医保网，但是水平并不高，所以我们今年还要增加30元财政补助的标准。我们建立了大病医保的制度，就是拿基本医保去购买商业的大病医保，这样使得有些病种在有些地方那个能报销到30万到50万，高的还有不封顶的。总体上，城乡居民的看病报销能够达到70%。我们还想随着国力的增加，逐步的提高，特别是要巩固脱贫攻坚的成果，对因病返贫、因大病致贫的要予以特殊的支持帮助。
China's fiscal revenue has reached 20 trillion RMB yuan, but the country still faces fiscal strains in some instances. However, we have ensured that government spending on education has stayed above 4% of GDP for 10 consecutive years. This is by no means easy. Most of the government funding increase has gone to compulsory education and in support of rural areas, which are still housing some 760 million people in China. We will ensure that more government funds will be channeled to support compulsory education in rural and remote areas. We have established in China the world's largest medical insurance system, covering some 1.4 billion people. However, the benefits are still quite modest at the moment. This year, the government will increase fiscal inputs in support of this development by 3 billion RMB yuan. In particular, we have established a program of medical insurance for major illnesses. We have combined government inputs with the purchase of commercial insurance policies. Even a lower amount of reimbursement under this scheme can reach 300 to 500,000 yuan, and in some places, no particular numerical cap is put on the amount of reimbursement. On average, some 70% of medical bills on the part of our rural and urban non-working residents can be reimbursed under our medical insurance, and we will continue to step up the level of benefits under the program. In particular, we need to consolidate the outcomes in ending absolute poverty and provide particular support to prevent people from falling back into poverty because of major illnesses.
基本民生啊，还是和日常生活息息相连。现在我们跨省流动的人超过1个亿，他们异地就业、养老、就学，往往要来回跑。确实啊，跨省通办已经成了新刚需。我们今年要实施一项政策，就是把人们常用的身份证电子化。也就是说，你拿着手机，在有关事项上一扫码就办成了。当然，我们也要为那些不用智能手机的人，特别是老人，提供便利，还要保障公民的信息安全和隐私。
Meeting basic living needs concerns people's daily lives. Nowadays, some 100 million Chinese are in cross-provincial mobility. Some are elderly people living away from hometowns with their children in cities. Some are for employment or education. So, getting things done interprovincially has become a new constant demand for the Chinese people. ID cards are in most frequent use in people's daily lives nowadays. One policy from the government this year is to make ID cards electronic so that relevant information can be accessed by a simple scan of a code on cell phones. We will also provide convenience for especially the elderly people who do not use smartphones that often. At the same time, we will also protect information security and individuals' privacy.
保障基本民生啊，既要用力、量力，更要用心，要坚持实事求是，让事实说话，要倾听人民群众的呼声、要求。其实民生问题啊，联系着民情、民意，甚至是民心。政府的职责就是要顺应民心，让人民 排忧解难，让人民过好日子。
In meeting resolving these concerns of our people, we must take every bit of solid effort and put our heart into it. We must be fully aware of the situation on the ground and always heed the people's call, because these issues bear on how our people live, the public opinion, and even popular support. It is the responsibility of the government to always follow the aspirations of the people, help them resolve concerns and difficulties, and enable them to lead a better life.
这里我还要强调一点，保障人民群众的合法权益，这是人民政府必须扛在肩上。最近啊，有的地方发生了严重侵害妇女群众权益的事件，我们不仅为受害者痛心，也为此事感到十分气愤啊！对于漠视群众权益的，要坚决追责问责；对那些拐卖妇女儿童的犯罪行为，要严厉打击，严惩不贷。保民安和惠民生是不可分割的，所以各级政府一定要把尽力惠民生、尽力保平安作为自己的基本职责。谢谢。
Here I want to emphasize that it is the very important duty of a people's government to always protect the lawful rights and interests of the people. The recent incident involving gross violation of women's rights and interests is indeed deeply distressing, and we feel indignant about it. Those who show disregard for the people's pains and sufferings must be held to account. Perpetrators in the trafficking of women must be brought to justice and prosecuted to the full extent of law. People's safety and a better life are closely interconnected, so it is the mission of governments at all levels to do everything we can to protect the people's safety and improve their lives. Thank you.
好，最后一个问题。
好，由于时间的关系，现在请提最后一个问题。
好，请北区第4排右旗第3位共同社严泽。
谢谢。总理你好，我是日本共同社的记者。中国政府表明，正照着共同富裕的目标迈进，提出为了防止资本的无序扩张而要设置红绿灯，特别是加强了对互联网巨头企业的监管。但是呢，外国资本则担心，因为共同富裕的目标，中国政府会不会进一步加强对企业行为的限制？请问，中方的看法如何？有方法去减低投资者的忧虑吗？谢谢。
Kyoto News Agency. China is working toward the goal of common prosperity and said it will adopt a traffic light regulatory approach to prevent unregulated expansion of capital. Regulation over giant internet companies has been tightened. Some foreign investors are hence concerned whether, because of the goal of common prosperity, that China will put more restrictions on corporate behaviors. Will the government take measures to alleviate the concerns of foreign investors?
我们说共同富裕那是要共同奋斗的。对外开放的政策，中国 没有，也不会变，而且我们的外商投资法都有明确的规定。要说变，那只会向有利于扩大开放、有利于投资贸易的方向发展。
Common prosperity can only be attained through common efforts. As far as China's opening up policy is concerned, there has been no change in our position, and nor will there be a change. There has been clear-cut stipulations in China's foreign investment law. If there will be any change, the change will be conducive to China's greater openness to promoting international exchanges, trade, and investment.
外商来华的确发展了自己，但也给我们带来了投资、销售渠道，带来了我们需要的商品，对大家都有利。我们为什么要限制呢？刚才我讲到放管服改革，就是强调要简政放权、放管结合、优化服务，反对垄断和不正当竞争，防止资本无序扩张，目的还是要给依法经营的企业撑腰打气，确保各类所有制企业中外资一律平等发展、公平竞争啊。那么，当然也希望我们企业在发展当中都是规范、健康的。
Well, foreign investors coming to doing business in China have developed themselves, but they have also brought us investment, the markets for sales, and the marketable goods for Chinese consumers. So we believe it is of mutual benefit. Why should we restrict it? Just now I mentioned the reform of government's functions. We mean to further improve our regulation and also refine government services. We are opposed to monopoly and unfair or illegitimate competition, and we will prevent the unregulated expansion of capital. This is a part of support for law-abiding businesses. It is also part of our effort to ensure a level playing field from all market entities, be it a Chinese or foreign invested one, and ensure that they will all have fair competition and healthy growth in a well-regulated way.
中国太大，你要找许多个案都能找得到，但从总体上看，中国经济已深度地融入世界。中国货物进出口总额占 GDP 的比重已经超过1/3，现在进口拉动的工业增加值超过70%，我们连续10年稳居全球第2大进口市场，而且连续5年成为全球货物贸易的第1大国。当然，总体上说，我们还属于产业链由中低端向中高端迈进的过程中，但这表明产业和消费都在升级，市场潜力大，各类投资都有空间。
China is a very big country, so it is natural for some individual cases to exist. But overall, China's economy has deeply integrated into the world economy. Imports and exports in goods now contribute to 1/3 of China's GDP, and imports have contributed to over 70% of industrial added value. For the past 10 years, China has remained the world's second largest import market, and for the past 5 years, the largest trader in goods. Chinese goods and industries at the moment are still transitioning from a lower middle end of industrial chain to a medium-high end. But all these Chinese industries and consumption are in the process of upgrading, and there is tremendous potential, and there is broad space for the growth of all types of investment.
东亚诸多国家和我们共同签署了区域全面经济伙伴关系协定，也就是 RCEP， 今年正式实施。这可以说是世界上最大的自贸区。我们会利用这一契机，继续推进自由贸易，对国企、民企、外企一视同仁，努力把中国打造成为全球外商投资的热土。
Together with many East Asian countries, China, with these countries, have signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, and this agreement has officially entered into force this year. It creates the world's largest free trade area. We will make the most of the opportunity of RCEP and continue to advance free trade. We will treat state-owned enterprises, privately held firms, and foreign invested enterprises as equals and continue to work hard to keep China a popular destination for global foreign investment.
我明确地告诉大家，无论国际风云如何变幻，中国都会坚定不移地扩大开放。长江黄河不会倒流。中国这40多年从来是在改革中前进，开放中发展。只要是有利于扩大高水平开放的事情，我们都愿意积极去做，而且要坚定地维护多边贸易体制，这也是我们自身发展的需要。
I can tell you very clearly that no matter how the international environment may change, China will keep to the course of wider openness, just as the course of the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers will not be reversed. China has all along developed itself in the course of reform and opening up. For anything that is conducive to a higher level opening up of this country, we will go for it.
中国对外开放40多年，发展了自己，造福了人民，也有利于世界。这是个机遇的大门，我们绝不会，也绝不能把它关上。谢谢大家。
It has been 40 years since China got on the journey of opening up. Opening up has brought benefits to the country and to its people. We will not and must not close this door of opportunity. Thank you.
感谢李克强总理，感谢大家对大会的关注和报道。记者会到此结束，谢谢大家。
Thank you, Premier Li, and thank you all for your attention to and coverage of the two sessions. That is the end of today's press conference. Thank you.
谢谢大家。
Thank you.